get talking, Canberra.
Oh, my. I'm the unsilent majority, Big Mouth.
Joining us as she does on a Thursday is New South Wales Liberal Senator Concetta Fierravanti-Wells. Connie, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
China has been something that you've been quite vocal about for a number of years now. The rest of the country, the rest of the world seems to have caught up. So I guess it is quite... I don't know that pleasing's the right word, but it's good that a number of countries now have come out and named and shamed China over this recent malicious cyber activity.
I'm very pleased that we've joined our international partners in calling out these malicious cyber activities by China's Ministry of State Security, and that it's very clear that the ministry has exploited vulnerabilities in the Microsoft Exchange software that affects thousands of computers and networks worldwide, including Australia. But we're also concerned about these reports from our partners that the Ministry of State Security in China is engaging contract hackers who have carried out cyber-enabled intellectual property theft for personal gain and to provide commercial advantage to the Chinese government. And it's important that this be called out. These are not the acts of a good international citizen, and that's really what I have been saying for a long, long time, and what I said quite a number of years ago.
There's a couple of issues that come out of this. Obviously, the relationship with China is the primary thing, but it obviously raises concerns about the reliance that we have on a very small number of tech giants. The fact that I think 60% of organisations use this exchange software means that we're all vulnerable. But also the concern is that whilst, as you say, they're Chinese-sponsored hackers who are doing the bidding of the Chinese government, we're also led to believe by some experts that they're also lining their own pockets at the same time. So it's kind of a double whammy.
It is, and of course, we have our Australian Cybersecurity Centre, which has identified the targeting and compromise of Australian organisations. And of course, we know that businesses and organisations have been targeted rather than individual users. And of course, the government assists through our cyber.gov.au with comprehensive instructions on how to install the necessary patches and how to investigate these potential compromises. And so, therefore, organisations and businesses are encouraged to work with the government, and indeed that we do, to deal with these issues when they arise. But I think the point really here is that it is important to call this stuff out, and I'm really pleased that there is a growing willingness for countries to do this. I know that we have in the past attributed malicious cyber activity to other countries, North Korea, Russia, China and Iran, and of course there was the calling out of Russia, holding them account for the campaign against that company SolarWinds. So there we have it, Stephen. It's really important that this is done.
Absolutely. Now, on a related note, Chinese ships have been spying on the Talisman Sabre military exercises. We spoke to your colleague, Jim Molan, about this earlier in the week, and he says it's not really something to be concerned about because it's nothing unusual, but presents an opportunity for us to actually show that we are prepared for any action that China might take in a military sense.
Absolutely. I mean, this is our biggest military exercise with the US. It's been conducted across northern Australia very successfully biannually since 2005, and this is the 9th year. But I think, as Peter Dutton has said, the presence of similar vessels hasn't detracted from exercises in the past, and he was very sure that it wouldn't impede it this year. Now, of course, we respect the right of all states to exercise freedom of navigation and overflight in international waters and airspace, just as we expect those countries to respect our right to do the same. And this has really been the issue in the past, notwithstanding the fact that China lost the arbitration in 2016, it continues to assert rights that it doesn't have in relation to features in the South China Sea, and that really is the issue here with China.
Which leads me to another issue that we discussed this morning with our UK correspondent, that the UK are sending 2 warships permanently to the Asia-Pacific region and will travel through the South China Sea, which obviously will be a point of contention, but good news that the UK are actually taking it seriously and are going to be there working alongside us in this region.
Yes, Stephen, it's very, very important in relation to freedom of navigation operations. And the reality is that if we assert and we assert a values-based foreign policy, then it is important that we act on that. And freedom of navigation operations are very important, and when we are asked, we should join those operations, because on the one hand, you cannot assert that the communist regime doesn't have the right, and it's all very well to go to the United Nations and demonstrate and profess that we don't recognise these rights, but at the same time, it is important that you do enforce your rights of freedom of navigation in the South China Sea, and I'm very pleased that countries like the United Kingdom are undertaking, countries like the UK, the United States and Australia should join those operations.
Absolutely. Now, lockdowns continue right across, most of Australia now. South Australia gone into lockdown, I think, out of sympathy for Victoria and New South Wales. Look, there's no one disputing that the COVID pandemic is well, I suppose there's a few people disputing it, but nobody seriously dismisses it as not something we need to be aware of. But this is obviously going to put real constraints on the sitting of Parliament the week after next. And you and I have discussed quite often that, and it's not just the pandemic, it predates that, the lack of parliamentary oversight of legislation these days. This just adds to that and fuels it.
It does, and of course the anger at state lockdowns is increasing. And as we've discussed before, at the beginning there was a greater understanding by the general public, but now people are fed up. I have to tell you, the stridency in the emails that I receive daily, they're very, very critical of the lockdowns and the long-term effect. But Stephen, what makes this worse is that we've seen draconian measures which have been imposed, which take away liberties that we have enjoyed, and they are measures that have not been scrutinised by federal and state parliaments. They've simply been enacted by executive governments without parliamentary scrutiny, and that is really another issue, and we've talked about the issue of delegated legislation in the committee that I chair and the concerns that have been legitimately raised.
Absolutely, and I think the other thing too is that people are starting to be frustrated by all of this "we're all in this together" talk, when the reality is that politicians, public servants and bureaucrats have not been impacted in any financial way by any of these lockdowns, but the private sector has, and it's very much a two-speed pandemic.
I think that that's a very accurate observation. I mean, it's very clear that businesses cannot continue under these stop-start conditions. The economic consequences will take years to recover from. And the other thing, of course, is the social impact of what is happening. I mean, we're starting to hear more about increased suicides. I mean, we haven't got full statistics in relation to this, but we are starting to see growing concerns about more domestic violence, child abuse, loneliness, people foregoing medical treatment. I mean, what is the long-term cost of this? And I suppose the question is, will the cure be worse than the disease?
And that's the point. Yeah, we hear about, we constantly hear about the mixed messages with regards to vaccines and the risk-benefit analysis, but the risk-benefit between deaths from COVID and deaths from the response to COVID don't seem to be discussed. Connie, good to talk to you. We'll catch up again next week.
Thanks a lot, Stephen.
Connie Fierravanti-Wells, New South Wales Senator, back with us next week. It is almost 7:20.